Well, happy Friday to everybody out there in YouTube land. Hope you're doing well today and looking forward to a really joyous weekend. Well, let's get right to it, shall we? Our first shout-outs for today are, our only shout-outs for today, the two we always have. Our first one is 18th's and Goodies. It's a metal detecting channel with a few other things thrown in for excitement, and quite a enjoyable channel to watch. So check out 18th's and Goodies. And our second one is I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Paparous What's in the Dirt, another metal detecting channel. Quite enjoy watching that one too. So I encourage you to go over and check him out as well. Paparous What's in the Dirt. And as always, I'll put links down in the description box. See down there? Yeah, right down there, down in the description box. You'll see links to these two channels. Alrighty, so 18th's and Goodies and Paparous What's in the Dirt. Alright. We will now pause for the following commercial message. And we're back after that message from our sponsor, who happens to be me, but that's beside the point. And let's get to today's story. Today's story is brought to us by me. There we go. Anyway, it's called The Water Ghost of Harrowby Hall, and it was written by John Kendrick Bangs. The trouble with Harrowby Hall was that it was haunted. And what was worse, the ghost did not merely appear at the bedside of a person, but remained there for 1 mortal hour before it disappeared. It never appeared except on Christmas Eve, and then, as the clock was striking 12, the owners of Harrowby Hall had tried their hardest to rid themselves of the damp and dewy lady who rose up out of the best bedroom floor at midnight, but they had failed. They had tried stopping the clock so that the ghost would not know when it was midnight, but she made her appearance just the same, and there she would stand until everything about her was thoroughly soaked. Then the owners of Harrowby Hall closed up every crack in the floor with hemp, and over it were placed layers of tar and canvas. The walls were made waterproof and the doors and windows likewise, in hope that the lady would find it difficult to leak into the room. But even this did no good. The following Christmas Eve she appeared as promptly as before, and frightened the guests in the room quite out of his senses by sitting down beside him and gazing with her cavernous blue eyes into his. In her long bony finger, bits of dripping seaweed were entwined, and the ends were hanging down, and these ends she drew across his forehead until he fainted away. He was found unconscious in his bed the next morning, simply saturated with seawater and fright. The next year, the master of Harrowby Hall decided not to have the best spare bedroom open at all, but the ghost appeared as usual in the room. That is, it was supposed she did, for the hangings were dripping wet the next morning. Finding no one there, she immediately set out to haunt the owner of Harrowby Hall himself. She found him in his own cozy room, congratulating himself upon having outwitted her. All of a sudden, the curl went out of his hair, and he was as wet as if he'd fallen into a rain barrel. When he saw before him the lady of the cavernous eyes and seaweed fingers, he too fainted, but immediately came to, because the vast amount of water in his hair trickling down over his face revived him. Now, it so happened that the master of Harrowby Hall was a brave man. He intended to find out a few things he felt he had a right to know. He would have liked to put the dry suit of clothes on first, but the ghost refused to leave him for an instant until her hour was up. In an effort to warm himself up, he turned to the fire. It was an unfortunate move, because it brought the ghost directly over the fire, which it then immediately extinguished. At this he turned angrily to her and said, "Far be it from me to be impolite to a woman, madam, but I wish you'd stop your infernal visits to this house. Go sit out on the lake, if you like that sort of thing. Soak the rain barrel if you wish, but do not come into a gentleman's house and soak him and his possessions in this way, I beg of you." "Henry Hardwick Oglethorpe," said the ghost in a gurgling voice, "you don't know what you're talking about. You do not know that I am compelled to haunt this place year after year by my terrible fate. It is no pleasure for me to enter this house and ruin everything I touch. I never aspired to be a shower bath, but it is my doom. Do you know who I am?" "No, I don't," returned the master of Harrowby. "I should say you were the Lady of the Lake." "No, I am the water ghost of Harrowby Hall, and I have held this highly unpleasant office for 200 years tonight." "How in the deuce did you ever come to be so elected?" asked the master. "Through a mistake," replied the spectre. "I am the ghost of that fair maiden whose picture hangs over the mantelpiece in the drawing-room." "But what made you get the house into such a spot?" "I was not to blame, sir," returned the lady. "It was my father's fault. He built Harrowby Hall, and the room I haunt was to have been mine. My father had it furnished in pink and yellow, knowing well that blue and gray was the only combination of colors I could bear. He did it to spite me, and I refused to live in the room. Then my father said that I could live there or on the lawn. He didn't care which. That night I ran from the house and jumped over the cliff into the sea." "Well, that was foolish," said the master of Harrowby Hall. "So I've heard," returned the ghost. "But I really never realized what I was doing until after I was drowned. I had been drowned a week when the sea nymph came to me. She informed me that I was to be one of her followers, and that my doom was to haunt Harrowby Hall for 1 hour every Christmas Eve throughout the rest of eternity. I was to haunt that room on such Christmas Eves as I found it occupied, and if it should turn out not to be occupied, I was to spend that hour with the head of the household." "I'll sell the place," said the owner. "That you cannot do, for then I must appear to any purchaser and reveal to him the awful secret of the house." "Do you mean to tell me that on every Christmas Eve that I don't happen to have somebody in the guest chamber, you are going to haunt me wherever I may be, taking all the curl out of my hair, putting out my fire, and soaking me through to the skin?" demanded the master. "Yes, Oglethorpe, and what is more," said the water ghost, "it doesn't make the slightest difference where you are. If I find the room empty, wherever you may be, I shall douse you with my spectral presence." Here the clock struck 1, and immediately the ghost faded away. It was perhaps more a trickle than a fading, but as disappearances went, it was complete. "By St. George and his dragon," cried the master of Harrowby Hall, "I swear that next Christmas there'll be someone in the spare room, or I'll spend the night in the bathtub." When Christmas Eve came again, the master of Harrowby was in his grave. He never recovered from the cold he caught that awful night. Harrowby Hall was closed, and the heir to the estate was in London. And there to him in his apartment came the water ghost at the appointed hour. Being younger and stronger, however, he survived the shock. Everything in his rooms was ruined. His clocks were rusted. A fine collection of watercolor drawings was entirely washed out. And because the apartment below his was drenched with water soaking through the floors, he was asked by his landlady to leave the apartments immediately. The story of his family's ghost had gone about. No one would invite him to any party except afternoon tea and receptions, and fathers of daughters refused to allow him to remain in their houses later than 8 o'clock at night. And so the heir of Harrowby Hall determined that something must be done. A thought came to him to have the fireplace in the room enlarged so that the ghost would evaporate at the first appearance. But he remembered his father's experience with the fire. Then he thought of steam pipes. These, he remembered, could lie hundreds of feet deep in water and still be hot enough to drive the water away in vapor. So the haunted room was heated by steam to a withering degree. The scheme was only partially successful. The water ghost appeared at the specified time, but hot as the room was, it shortened her visit by no more than 5 minutes in the hour. And during this time, the young master was a nervous wreck, and the room itself was terribly cracked and warped. And worse than this, as the last drop of water the ghost was slowly sizzling itself out on the floor, she whispered that there was still plenty of water where she came from, and that next year would find her as exasperatingly saturating as ever. It was then that, going from one extreme to the other, the heir of Harrowby Hall hit upon a means by which the water ghost was ultimately conquered, and happiness came once more to the house of the Oglethorpes. The heir provided himself with a warm suit of fur underclothing. Wearing this, with the furry side in, he placed over it a tight-fitting rubber garment like a jersey. On top of this he drew on another set of woolen underclothing, and over this was a second rubber garment like the first. Upon his head he wore a light and comfortable diving helmet. And so clad, on the following Christmas Eve, he awaited the coming of his tormentor. It was a bitterly cold night that brought to a close this 24th day, It was a bitterly cold night that brought to a close this 24th day of December. The air outside was still, but the temperature was well below zero. Within all was quiet. The servants of Harrowby Hall awaited with beating hearts the outcome of their master's campaign against his supernatural visitor. The master himself was lying on the bed in the haunted room, dressed as he was in his suit. The clock clanged out the hour of 12. There was a sudden banging of doors. A blast of cold air swept through the halls. The door leading to the haunted chamber flew open. A splash was heard, and the water ghost was seen standing at the side of the heir of Harrowby. Immediately from his clothing there streamed rivulets of water, but deep down under the various garments he wore, he was as dry and warm as he could have wished. "Ha!" said the young master of Harrowby. "I'm glad to see you. You are the most original man I've met." "If that's true," returned the ghost. "May I ask, where did you get that hat?" "Certainly, madam," returned the master courteously. "It is a little portable observatory I had made for just such emergencies as this. But tell me, is it true that you are doomed to follow me about for one mortal hour, to stand where I stand, to sit where I sit?" "That is my happy fate," returned the lady. "Well, we'll go out on the lake," said the master, standing up. "You can't get rid of me that way," returned the ghost. "The water won't swallow me up. In fact, it will just add to my present bulk." "Nevertheless," said the master, "we will go out on the lake." "But my dear sir," returned the ghost, "it is fearfully cold out there. You will be frozen hard before you have been out 10 minutes. "Oh, no, I'll not," replied the master. "I'm very warmly dressed. Come." This last in a tone of command that made the ghost ripple. And they started. They had not gone far before the water ghost showed signs of distress. "You walk too slowly," she said. "I am nearly frozen. I beg you, hurry." "I should like to oblige a lady," returned the master courteously, "but my clothes are rather heavy, and 100 yards an hour is about my speed. Indeed, I think we had better sit down on this snowdrift and talk matters over." Do not do so, I beg," cried the ghost. Let us move on. I feel myself growing rigid as it is. If we stop here, I shall be frozen stiff." "That, madam," said the master slowly, seating himself on the ice cake, "that is why I have brought you here. We have been on this spot just 10 minutes. We have 50 more. Take your time about it, madam, but freeze. That is all I ask of you." "I cannot move my right leg now," cried the ghost in despair, "and my overskirt is a solid sheet of ice. Oh, good kind Mr. Oglethorpe, light a fire. Let me go free from these icy fetters." "Never, madam, it cannot be. I have you at last." "Alas," cried the ghost, a tear trickling down her frozen cheek, "help me, I beg. I congeal." "Congeal, madam, congeal," returned Oglethorpe coldly. "You are drenched, and have drenched me for 200 years. Tonight you have had your last drench." "Ah, but I shall thaw out again, and then you'll see. Instead of the comfortably warm, genial ghost I have been in the past, sir, I shall be ice water," replied the lady threateningly. "No, you won't either," returned Oglethorpe, "for when you are frozen quite stiff, I shall send you to a cold storage warehouse, and there shall you remain, an icy work of art, for evermore." "But warehouses burn," said the ghost. "So they do, but this warehouse cannot burn. It is made of asbestos, and surrounding it are fireproof walls, and within those walls the temperature is now, and shall be, 416 degrees below zero, low enough to make any icicle make an icicle of any flame in this world or the next," the master added with a chuckle. "For the last time, I beseech you, I would go on my knees to you, Oglethorpe, if they were not already frozen. I beg of you, do not do this to me." Here even the words froze on the water ghost's lips, and the clock struck 1. There was a momentary tremor throughout the ice-bound form. The moon, coming from behind a cloud, shone down on the rigid figure of the beautiful woman sculpted in clear, transparent ice. There stood the ghost of Harrowby Hall, conquered by the cold, a prisoner for all time. The heir of Harrowby had won at last, and today in a large storage house in London stands the frigid form of one who will never again flood the house of Oglethorpe with woe and seawater. So there you have it, the water ghost of Harrowby Hall. Well, hope you enjoyed that. Sorry for the little goofies in my reading, but it does happen. Whoops. And it would seem I'm slowly losing my voice here, but before I lose my voice totally, of course, we have to have the Groaner of the week. Well, Mr. Wongles, an elderly gentleman, was not feeling quite well. So he decided that he would call his doctor and go in to see him. So he phoned his doctor's office and was informed that the doctor was booked solid for the next month, and then was departing for Europe for 2 weeks. So it would be at least 6 weeks before he could get in to see the doctor. And Mr. Wongles thought, well, that's too long. I mean, I could die in that length of time. So he decided he would go to a walk-in clinic. So off he went and found the nearest walk-in clinic to his abode. Went to the desk and said, "I'd like to see a doctor." "Oh, yes, sir, of course. Please fill in these forms." "Oh, I'm quite sorry. I've forgotten my reading glasses," said Mr. Wongles. "Would you mind filling it in for me? I'll provide the answers." "Oh, not at all, sir, not at all. So, first of all, your name." "My name is Walter Arthur Wongles." So the lady writes that down. And she writes down his address as he gives it, and his phone number. She asks for his health card number. It's 771-225-1414. She dutifully writes that down. "And what is your complaint today?" "Oh, just general melancholy and not feeling good all over, and at my age, you can't be too careful." "Well, that's fine, sir. You just go have a seat, and as soon as we can get you in, Dr. Muharremby will see you." "Pardon?" "I said have a seat and Dr. Muharremby will see you." And the old gentleman leans over the counter and says, "Witch doctor?" And she says, "Oh, no, sir, he's fully qualified." And there you have it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed your ghost story and your groaner, and please go by and check out our 2 shoutouts. And till Tuesday, when we do some cooking or baking or something fun in the kitchen, have a wonderful weekend. Take care, stay safe, and God bless.